Right, good. Well, now we've more or less told you about this, but this is the first images are very funny. It's us going to America. There's us in the car. Look at that funny grey-haired woman with that dreadful bad-tempered face. This is us going. Oh, that's it. That's our.
I want you all to appreciate how she matches the interior. Yellow, yellow. She knew that we were taking a black cab and prepared.
Right. Well, now the next one is even funnier, really.
Oh, and this is the wheelchair.
That's a lovely
which
wheelchair.
Is literally, it turned out to be like the Jaguar of wheelchairs.
It's wonderful.
It was amazing. And then our various suitcases.
We took too many clothes. We took too many.
That's because you insisted on having 18 outfits.
Well, I didn't. Well, wore one thing. This is us in the aeroplane. Needless to say,
she started drinking. I had not, so I don't know why I look like that. But that was us in the plane. And this, mind you, was premium economy on Virgin Atlantic. So
very good.
This was actually better than first class, funnily enough. So we highly recommend going premium economy. They were really great.
Okay, next one. This is wonderful. These are the buses. I was in love with all the bus drivers. Look at this wonderful thing that they put out so that you can be wheeled into it. And there's the front of the bus, you see, quite narrow. And they are so quick. They were so kind and so sweet. They didn't grumble or anything. They were just helpful.
So fun fact, when we started hitting the streets of New York on the Monday. We arrived on the Sunday night. And then the first day, did you tell them? I was the ding dong who thought it was a good idea to walk. What was it? 60 blocks?
Well, must have been 60 blocks.
60 blocks.
We were 31 and it's 80 something.
60 blocks uptown. We got to see a lot, which was great. But at that point, I think I was sort of exhausted before we even began. And then we decided not necessarily to take Ubers, but to attempt the MTA. And on the first try, we just hit it fantastically. And there
I am sitting there.
Strapped in, she's holding on. So that basically it's amazing how it's existence minimum in terms of design. This is at the front of the bus. And this is a set of seats that folds up. And then I just put her in her lightweight little Jaguar. And then everything straps in. So I got really good at unlocking her and locking her in like under 10 seconds flat. So the bus didn't have to wait for us to get on and off. But it was so good. And we literally never, ever took an Uber.
No, never again.
Never took an Uber.
This was only in New York. This didn't work. We didn't try.
We did not attempt the bus in Philadelphia.
No, we didn't.
No.
Okay, next one. Now, this first most important exhibition was the one which was in Paris. And some of you have probably seen it. But it was such an incredibly beautiful exhibition that I felt I didn't waste time. I was absolutely convinced that this is what we were going to be looking at. And something very strange happened for both of us, actually, but for me most especially. I was so surprised. Manet pushed Degas off the wall. There was no question about it. Manet was streets ahead. Every painting was made Degas look, and that wonderful draftsman. Later on, when we go further into other places and we see late Degas, he does his late ones are still beautiful, because basically the Manet and Degas exhibition is over when Manet dies, and of course he dies at 83, and so Degas doesn't die until 1917, and his late work is really very beautiful. Okay, let's have the first two, and I'll show you what I mean, because these are absolutely extraordinary. The Degas is a self-portrait, and it was 1955, very early. And his background is Italian stroke American, and his father. They're wealthy. They both come from wealthy background, both of them. And the self-portrait of Manet's, which is in the middle, is later. That's 1870, actually 1878. But the one on the extreme right is very interesting. He had, in the end, he married the lady, but there's a very interesting series of the father of the man called Leon Lenov, who in fact probably it was Manet's illegitimate child. But he's always called Suzanne's brother. And he was born in 1860, or they got together in 1860. She was the music teacher for the Manet boys. And there's some people think that it was Manet's father who was the father of this Lenov person. But anyway, the picture on the right is when they've married. It's 1863. He doesn't marry her until his father dies, and this is a sort of a pretending idea of a sort of a romantic. It's called fishing, but actually there's a portrait of her and his self-portrait, and they're dressed in 17th century costume. It's a charming and rather pretty thing. It's all paint on water on paper. Okay, next one. Now this is very, very interesting. This is much, much later. Manet and Degas actually meet in the Louvre, but they become friendly and rivals, really. And Manet, eventually Degas, when they're quite close together, by 1868, he does this double portrait. He has a portrait of Manet listening to his wife playing the piano, because she was, after all, a pianist. And when he presents it to him as a present, he gives it to Manet as a present. And when Manet looks at it, he doesn't like the way Degas has painted his wife, so he cuts it up. And when Degas comes to see him, he's absolutely horrified to see that he's damaged his picture. And there was a big quarrel. He snatched it back, and he took it back. And for a while they weren't speaking. But the one on the right is Manet, the same year, 1868-9, and this is Madame Manet at the piano. So he paints Manet, paints his wife, Susan, because he was so cross in the way that Degas was. I think it's a marvelous picture of Manet looking slightly bored, really. And this caused a big trouble between them for a while. But as everybody said, nobody could be cross with Manet for very long because he was so charming. Okay, next one. This is so interesting. Now, there's the family. Here is Manet's family on the left. His father was a very high-grade civil servant, wealthy background, and the mother came from a wealthy background too. And this is 1860. And the one in the middle, it's Degas' painting of his grandfather. It was the grandfather who started the business, which was half Italian, half in sort of export business, which actually lost money in the end. But at the time, it was very successful. But it's a marvelous portrait of him. This is 1867, and this is 1860. This is Manet, and this is Degas. But one of the most beautiful is this one. And this is Manet's picture of his wife, Susan, and the mysterious Lenov. And it's called Reading, because he's reading to her. But look at the detail. When you see, Camilla did the most incredible photographs, because you see the detail of it. And my goodness, look at that paint quality. It's just extraordinary. Beautiful piece of work. Okay, next one. And this, of course, is the famous Bellini family. And this particular family it's his aunt, actually. She's his Aunt Laura, and a very, very uncomfortable marriage. And you can see it. All of this you can see in this. And it is, without question, one of the most interesting he did. It's done 1858, and he reworks it in 1869. But it's so interesting in the way he's described the actual condition of the marriage. The little girl in the middle is the only one who is connected to both the father and the mother. At the back of his Aunt Laura is a portrait, his own portrait of his father. So it's a totally sort of family thing. It's painted in very, 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 very light, thin paint. And you're going to see that this is going to develop. Now, the picture on the right, which is lovely, it's Manet of a little boy with a sword, and that's 1861. Look at look at the quality of the paint, the paintwork. And notice the blacks. He's absolutely fantastic with blacks. He was very, very, very interested in Franz Hals. He goes at one point to Spain, and he becomes completely obsessed with Spanish painting, particularly Velázquez. And you see this again and again in the work later on. Now let's put the next one on. This one, Manet tried to get into the salon. He was always trying to put pictures in the salon, and they were always being turned down. And this particular one of Christ, the Dead Christ with Angels, was 1863 to 8. There's a detail here. But again, an extraordinarily interesting composition. The figures on the right are Degas. This is Degas' cousin, and it's Edmondo and Thérèse Morbelet. And it's 1868. He died young. He died quite soon after this picture was painted. And it's rather an interesting, again, an interesting, Degas manages to sort of tell us a lot about the relationship of the people he's painting. Okay, next one. And of course, this is Desjardins. Now, interestingly, this particular image is from the original Desjardins, but the one in the exhibition was our Courtauld one. He did several versions of it. And of course, this was the one that caused all the great excitement, because actually, this did get into the salon and caused an absolute uproar. And this is when his name as the head of the remember that at the time, the people who were painting for the salon were people like Meissonier and very, very salon type pictures. And of course, this was a tremendously considered, it was considered extremely rude. It actually was based, to a very large extent, it was based on something he'd seen of Raphael. The one on the right, of course, is Degas. And this particular woman is the wife of a friend of his, a woman called Balson, and it is 1865. And it's an extraordinary painting of flowers, and she's hardly in it, really, in a way. Okay, next to. Now here, of course, is the infamous Olympia, and this was painted in 1863. And above it is another painting. Both of these were at the salon, and it's the Dead Toreador. Originally, he cut it later. There was another part at the top, but actually, I should really have put it in just in its own thing, because it's a marvelous piece of painting, extraordinary piece of painting, and this detail gives you some idea of the quality of the paint. Now, Olympia, again, is these two details are very worth looking at. Look at this splendid little cat here, and the foot, splendid little foot here. But this particular one, of course, caused an enormous problem, and there's no doubt that this became sort of the beginning of a sort of modernism. Really, it's really telling the world as it was. I mean, she's a courtesan, and there's no question about it that one of her lovers sent her the flowers, and you can see the whole thing in the painting. Okay, next one. But this one is just extraordinary. I think these details show you. This is when he's come back from Spain, and he's absolutely mad about all things Spanish. And this is Lola de Valence, and she was a Spanish dancer. And of course, she's you can see here she's behind the screen, and the stage is in the front. But look at this paint quality. Just look at the way he paints these. And this, I think, this way that he manages somehow to paint this very delicate, almost chiffon types of cloth, and the arm through the back. It's a marvelous painting, this one. It's 1862, by the way. Okay, next one. This is very funny. I want you to remember this, because this is Manet, the woman, the young lady, it's called young lady, but we always call it the lady with the parrot. And here you see Camilla's done a little small picture of the parrot. Now I want you to remember this, because later on you're going to see a Courbet upon which it was a reference, I'll put it that way. Nice painting. The one on the right I'd never seen before. I still don't really, it's still a very strange one. And it's Degas, and it's a young woman with an ibis. And it's earlier, it's 1857-58. And but it was reworked in 1862. So it started early and finished later. And it's very surprising. I'd never seen anything quite like that. But this is the nice way, the way it's hung together. Wherever possible, they put images which have relationships together. Okay, next one, like this one. And this, of course, is Zola. Now, all of these pictures we've seen, so Degas been trying to get them shown at the salon, but he's had tremendously bad criticism that everybody hated them. And Zola came to his rescue. And so he did this portrait really to say thank you to Zola, because Zola at that time had started his great novel. You know, he's the great friend of Cézanne, and this is the connection between all of them. Now, he was working for a newspaper, and if you remember that picture of Cézanne's father sitting reading the newspaper, that's the newspaper he was working for, it's Livermore. But he wrote a long article in defense of Degas, of Manet, and for which he was immediately kicked out. But this picture is very interesting when you look at it carefully, because what you see is he's holding in his hand a series of Manet's lithographs, but on the back there are things that interest them both. You see, you've got the Japanese print here, and you've got here, of course, a Velasquez, and here, of course, is Olympia, and all of these things. This picture is very, very interesting. But the one on the right is by Degas, and this is Tissot. Now, Tissot was very successful. He was of all of them, he was tremendously successful. And he was a fashionable sort of salon painter. But it's an interesting painting because it talks about their mutual interest. Because at the back of Tissot, you see the Cranach. And at the top, I think it's, again, a Japanese image. Okay, next to these. Now we come to the advent of Berthe Morisot. Now, again, they got to know each other quite literally. Morisot was introduced to Degas, to Manet first, I think, in the Louvre by Tissot. And the families all come from the same sort of group of sort of highbrow, wealthy group of people. And the families have become very, very close to each other. And in the end, all through her life, she's going to be sort of always having great sort of meetings of dinner parties and so on. But she organized the whole thing. And on the left, it was the first time one of the family are being painted. It's painted by Degas. It's her sister. And this particular picture is Madame Gobelard, but she's Eve Morisot. And this is her 1869. And this picture, they actually commissioned it. And then this is when Manet paints her for the first time. And this is called Repose. And this is 1871. So this is 69, 71. And there's no doubt he was tremendously smitten with her. She was obviously a great beauty and a very, very interesting and a very good painter, as you know. Let's have the next one, because this one is the one we all know. which of course again is her. It's the balcony. And a singer is standing beside her and a playwright behind. But really the whole emphasis is on this beautiful figure of Berthe Morisot. Look at the little dog. Look at the detail of the plant and the sense of space, the way that this lovely balcony, this balustrade comes out to us. Again, the detail is lovely. So it of course,
very spatial.
It's a beautiful picture, this one. It works so beautifully.
He has such a connection to his sitters as well.
Precisely.
To his subject.
I think you see, you said something clever about this a little while ago. Camilla suggested, and I think it's correct, that he liked his sitters. You get the sense of communication between the artist and the people in the way that you simply don't get with
because we talked about
Degas.
the intention behind the artist or the creative and what they were doing.
Yes, you see, it was extraordinary, but you get it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, with him, this is so beautiful. Her father dies, and this is Berthe Morisot in mourning. And of course, Manet is married. So what does she do? She marries his brother. And the one on the right is by Degas, and it's a painting of Eugène Manet, the year of their marriage. They marry in 1874. This is 72, and this is 74. It's interesting, these people, these two. This is possibly one of the most beautiful of Manet's paintings of her, I think. It's called Morisot with violets. Surprisingly, there's a bunch of violets you can hardly see in the center there. Okay, this is 72, again 74. Now, this is a surprise. The next one is a surprise. This is when they're both painting horses, but this one is Manet. And this is the racetrack at Longchamp. And this is 1866. Very interestingly, these are two very good detailed. This is here, you see this bit here. But again, look at the paint quality. Look at the way he describes space. This, I think, is incredible. These people, these horses here. Now, this was 1866, and they're both going to the races. And the next one is going to be, you won't be surprised, of course, and this is one of the Degas. I could have chosen several Degas. This particular one was 65, 66, and it's called the race horses before the stands. And it's, again, interestingly, painted oil on paper, which is later on put on canvas. This is something that Degas does all the time, and eventually he's going to give up oil paint, as you know, and go almost entirely to pastel. But this time he's still painting relatively thinly. Okay, next one next one is very interesting. I haven't been able to find out who these people are. It's a very interesting picture because it's called Sulking, and I think it's so interesting because it really does show. Look how cross the man is. Lovely detail of them at the top. This is Degas. Of course, in the background on the wall is one of his own pictures of race horses. But I don't know who the girl is, and I don't really know why it was chosen. They spent the summers usually out of Paris, and at this particular time, in 1864, it was the American Civil War. And Manet spent his summers in Boulogne. And at that point, the next one describes a fight between the South and the West and the North. It's the battle of the Kearsarge and the Alabama. The Alabama is the southern boat, and the Kearsarge is the winner, actually, in the northern boat. And here you see details of people being from this broken boat here. And this is Manet in Boulogne in 1864. He does at least 2 of them. I didn't put them all on because literally I had to make a decision. There were just too many pictures, as we showed. But there's another one here. But this one I think is the most interesting. And of course, it brings it up to date with the political point, of course, of the American Civil War at that point. Okay, next to this, I think is wonderful. I didn't know this one at all. This is a Manet, and it's called In the Garden. Look at that marvelous, marvelous sense of the man. This lovely detail here, his feet behind that little child in the path. It's a beautiful piece of work. Again, notes this extraordinary way that he can deal with this very sort of light, almost gauze-like material. Does it again and again and again. We don't know who I didn't know particularly who she is. Okay, she's probably a member of the family. But this one we all know. It's the beautiful Manet, the boating. And look at the detail of this one. Isn't that extraordinary? This one, again, is 1870, we're up to the 1870s, is 1874. As you see, the lovely thing about this exhibition is that they have chosen very carefully, so the pictures are similar ideas, because the next one will show Degas, unusually, painting the seaside. And this is Degas' beach scene of 1869-70. And again, interestingly, the detail here is interesting. I don't think it works as well. I think this is one of the ones that didn't really stand up. It's a strange, it almost looks as if it's been painted in 2 parts. Can you see a strip here, which is very strange? Okay, next one. But this one, I for some reason can't get a decent slide of this one. I don't know why it is. This one is the Monet family at Argenteuil, and this was painted in 1874, and I think it's absolutely sweet because there's Monet. You know, he was mad about gardening, and there he is in the corner, and this is the lovely Camille and his son. And these details of this. I don't know why I can't get a good slide of this. Camilla didn't take one of this one. I don't know why. She took the details. And so I had going on, Pat. I know. For some reason or another, I couldn't get a decent example of it. It looks blurred, doesn't it? No, it is blurred. It is blurred. But they all like. I mean, I know it's impressionism, but it is blurred. Okay, next one. But this one is just astonishing. Look at the Manet on the right and look at the Degas on the left. And this is what we mean. You know everything about this young woman. Look at the sadness. It's just called Plum Brandy. It's 1872. And just look at her face and the detail. And then compare it to Degas of 1875. And this is called In the Cafe, or really now the Absinthe Drinker. But compare the connection between the artist and the model of the Degas and the one of the Manet. I think this is interesting to see women smoking at this time. Obviously, both of these ladies are sort of prostitutes, really, and they both have this interesting. Sort of. Can we assume that? Well, I think so, because you see, a middle-class lady would not be sitting smoking. I mean, if she smoked, she would be smoking at home, but not in public. I mean, it would be considered being extremely bad taste. What we thought was weird was this thing. Yes, strange, wasn't it? This sort of like thing here. We don't know what that is. It looks like a newspaper, I think. Oh, I think it's very awkward. It's a very awkward piece. It's a very strange picture, this one. Okay, next one. This is wonderful. Look at this Manet. And this is in the Cafe Concert of 1879. Just look at that paint quality, that marvelous quality of the people being squashed. You can almost see them in the bar now. And this, of course, is Degas. And this is Degas, the orchestra at the opera of 1870. Marvelous piece of painting. It's by now, of course, has become very interested in it. Both of them are interested in the new world. And this one, of course, is Nana, which I think is one of the funniest and sweetest of Manet's. Look at her stockings with her embroidery in the front, and her corset, and her protector, I suppose, sitting beside her, looking at her as she's looking at us. And the one on the right is this is 77, by the way, and the one on the right is Degas, and it's the singer in the cafe in green, but we're beginning to see the beginning use of pastel here, and you see at the top here. It's a particularly nice one, this one. Okay, next one. Now we come to this extraordinary picture of the end, and I've now found some interesting information about this. This, of course, is the execution of Maximilian. Now, this is a political painting. I may say that both of Degas and Manet were Republicans, and at this particular point, they'd lived through the Civil War, really, of 1870, when the Crown was trying to come back. And this particular picture is a political picture because the French Crown had put in charge, as king of Mexico, and Mexicans had a small revolution and they shot him. And this is the execution of Maximilian. Now, Manet was so interested in this that he actually painted about 4 examples. I've got one more, and this one was the final one that he tried to exhibit at the Salon. But the Salon, it was too political. The Salon wouldn't accept it, and when he did a lithograph of the same thing, that was not allowed to be shown anyway. Now, the point about this particular picture is, when it was rejected by the Salon, after his death, his son, or this Leon Linov, they cut it up, or he'd begun to cut it up. And this is what I'm going to read you now because it's so touching. This is what happened. It says, in October the 29th, and we're talking now in he died in 84, by the way, so we're now talking in 1890. In October 29, Degas buys the central portion of Manet's execution of Maximilian from Vollard for the equivalent of 2,000 francs in works of his own art. He already owns the right portion of the canvas, depicting the sergeant loading his rifle, which he purchased from Portier. Vollard recounts the circumstances of the sale. When Degas saw the soldat in my shop, which he recognized at once of having belonged to the same canvas as his sergeant, he was thunderstruck. Then he took his stand between me and the picture, and with his hand on it by way of possession, he said, "You're going to sell me that, and you'll go back to Madame Manet and tell her I want the legs of the sergeant that are missing from my bit, as well as what's missing from yours. The group formed by Maximilian and the generals, I'll give her something for it." And then there's another message about it from Julie Manet, the daughter of Bert Morisot. According to Julie Manet, the dealer Cameron showed us a photograph of a fragment of the first version of the execution of Maximilian. This painting was at the printing shop of the brother of Aunt Suzanne Manet, and M. Linov, who first cut away the Maximilian to sell it separately with the rest and sent it to Monsieur Cameron and Portier. The latter cut away the sergeant behind the soldiers, so the painting is now in 3 fragments. Monsieur Degas is looking for them, and who already found 2, is going to try to reunite them and put the painting back as it was. And when Manet died, he bought masses of every time the Vollard or anybody had Manets for sale, Degas would be in there trying to buy them. Okay, next one, I'll show you. This one is one of the finished. This is in the Mannheim collection, and this is possibly what the original would possibly, the composition would be the similar. And there's no doubt about it. Degas was so determined that Manet's stuff was held together, that he tried to sell it whenever there was a sale. He tried to buy it, and he had in the end masses of Manet's. Okay, next one. Now this is the last picture that Manet painted, and of course it's Suzanne with the cat. And with it, I've put another of his pictures of Bert Morisot, which he painted in 1872. The last picture of his wife, of course, was just before his death. He died. He was only about 51 when he died. He was very young, and this was painted in 1883, the year he died, and the Bert Morisot one is 72. He dies in 83, and Degas lives until 1917. Okay, next one. Now we're going to the permanent collection of the Lehman collection. And this is what I was talking about earlier, when you get this whole sense of the pictures. Or I want to show you briefly how they were. Oh, this is, I'd forgotten about this one. This is the Mondrian Hotel. This is my room, and you see on the top there, they've got images of Mondrian's work. Actually, Mondrian died in America, in 59th Street, not very far. I thought this is why they called this place the Mondrian. It's a very nice hotel, and that's looking from my window. So you're actually looking at Park Avenue throughout.
Park Avenue East
side, yes. And there is now this is the first day. This is our first when Kimberly was pushing me, and this is the library. And we went inside the library, which was really very spectacular. Okay, next one. But this is the inside of the Met, and it was so difficult. This is the American wing, but I mean, this is the restaurant is off on this side. Right up here, there are different, and you were walking through all the time, and it was absolutely packed with people the whole time. It was a very difficult experience. We didn't enjoy it at all, really. Okay, next one. And this is the first, again, I'm deliberately putting on pictures to give you an idea of how the point of this gallery was that it was the Lehman collection. Now, the one on the left, of course, is Caspar David Friedrich. It's two men contemplating the moon. It's 1825. Now, what is so interesting? This is a German landscape, and it has a sort of attitude of spirituality, because what is the one on the right? Of course, it's Constable. But they're both the same year, 1825. And they're both really about a religious situation, because Constable's, of course, is Salisbury Cathedral. But it's Salisbury Cathedral with the bishop in the bishop's garden, and there is the bishop and his wife pointing to the shrine. The difference of the two, I think, is terribly interesting. Actually, it's one of the, I was surprised to see it. It's one of the Constable painted Salisbury lots and lots of time, and this was the final one. But the year are the same. Now, this is so interesting. Remember me telling you, remember Manet's picture of the lady with the parrot. Well, it's in response to this very rude Courbet of the lady with the parrot, which was painted in 1860. Now, Courbet is a very, very important precursor of these two, because by now he was a very successful artist, but he was a very, they were both interested in the idea of a republic, but in Courbet's case, of course, he was a revolutionary figure. And then in the Civil War of 1870, when they'd gone to war with Prussia and they'd failed, and France had lost the war, and there was this tremendous problem after it. The Paris separated himself from France and called itself the Commune, and a great supporter of the Commune was Courbet. And for this, when the Commune was defeated, and the government came back again, he was exiled, and he died in exile in Switzerland. And so the pictures in this I was showing you, this is the Courbet. He was born in 1819, he died in 1877. And the picture on the left is one of his early works. This is 1840, the male nude. But the woman with the parrot, which is really very, very funny and very, 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 as I said, we remember Manet's reference to the same thing, and this is what it was about. It's a nice, Courbet is a beautiful painter. Okay, next one. But now we're going to see some really great Degas. I mean, there is no doubt about them. These three were just extraordinary. They're all about the same year. They're between 1885 and 1886. And it's woman having her hair combed, and of course they're pastel. And this incredible middle one, woman drying her feet, as somebody said on Tuesday, how on earth she held that pose to allow Degas to paint. It's difficult to believe. It must have been very uncomfortable. And the one on the right is slightly later. Can you see it's become much, much freer? And it's woman drying herself. And you can see the marks of the pastel. It's a beautiful piece. Now the next one is interesting because it shows the difference between Degas as a young man and Degas as a completely developed artist, because this one here, the dance lesson, is 1879. And remember that thin painting, careful painting, and this one. But look at this one of the pastel, and this is 1900. Look at the difference. It's quite exciting, quite interesting. It's a beautiful picture, this one. They're enormously complicated. Look at the difference in the space with the windows, with the mirror. And this whole sense of the way that this movement is described is very extraordinary. Okay, next one. Now here we have, Camilla and I fell madly in love with Pissarro again. We were very cross because Pissarro never gets any sort of real, doesn't have the same sort of facets, but it's made of money. But what a beautiful painter he is. And I only put one on, actually, but this is so lovely. It's the Boulevard Montmartre on a wintry morning in 1897. Again, look at the paint quality. And of course, on the left, it's one of the Cézannes. It's really a lovely Cézanne. This one is a late one. It's the still life with the ginger pot and the eggplant. It's 1893. So in fact, they're completely the same time. And it's very interesting to see the the spatial games that Cézanne is playing. And this, of course, is what's going to really bring about the development of Cubism, because he completely destroys the sense of single-eye perspective, which, of course, is used by Pissarro on the right. Look at the different spatial ideas of this one. You're never quite sure what is in front and what is behind. Okay, but this one, of course, is one of the most important pictures. This was the beginning of Impressionism, when Monet and Renoir together went to Argenteuil, and this is the voting party, and this is really the beginning of Impressionism. I put them on together like this because I wanted to describe how the paint quality actually changes, because on the right, we've got a Seurat, the landscape of a Seurat, unusual one here. Seurat's dates were 1859, he died in 91. Monet's, of course, were 1840. He was older, and he died in 1926. He lived much longer. But the Monet picture is 69, and the Seurat's is 81. I just wanted to show you how this new sense of almost casual, they were criticized, of course, as saying they were presenting sketches to the public rather than finished painting. And this is what eventually Seurat did with the new idea of the bright color. Okay, next one. This was one. I was so grateful to see this. I always really wanted to see this picture. This is Seurat's painting of the sideshow in Montmartre in 1887, 88. It's extraordinary. It is so creepy. You really do feel the sense of sort of unease in this sort of street show. And of course, Gauguin's The Siesta. And they're both the same time, roughly. This is 1892. Gauguin's dates, he died in 1903. He was born in 1840. He's the same age as Monet, virtually. I put the dates on because it's interesting to see how much who is the older and who is the younger. Because next one is going to be Van Gogh. Now I'm going to ask Camilla to talk about this because Camilla fell madly in love with Van Gogh this time. You talk about it, Camilla. It's the shoes and the olive tree, that tree.
Trying to think about how it came about. It just kind of happened, really. I guess, I don't know, like when you sort of, it's love at first sight kind of thing, or maybe it's when you see somebody that you know for a while, and then all of a sudden they change in your sight, in your vision. And with Van Gogh, we're always kind of presented with the same images of Van Gogh. And then going back to Pat's earlier comment about the intention of the creative, it just seemed like with him and his brain and his spirit, he was communicating something through his work. And it's interesting that Pat should put these two side by side, because this is just a close-up of a very banal pair of boots, and then this is a landscape. Yet he's always trying to tell us something or share his way of looking at the world. And it's, in terms of communicating, it's just so effective. And to get up close and to see them in person, it's almost like a spiritual experience.
It really was amazing. And the interesting thing about the one on the right, you know, when he came from Holland, he spent about sort of 8 or 9 months in Paris. And he met, of course, Seurat. And it's his experience, Seurat's experience of pointillism, which you begin to see. You see, this is much later. The shoes are 88, and this one, you see, is 89. It's a year later.
But he doesn't ever lose his own sense of self.
Never does.
And
they're
not,
always his.
Not to mention, not only that, but then also one thing that we did discover was how he was constantly pushing himself as a creative.
Yeah,
he was always trying to kind of level up into another territory that he hadn't yet reached. So he wasn't complacent with his style. He was always experimental. And I think this was also driven by a great sense of his own curiosity about himself, about life, about people. And so that's, I think, why I kind of fell
badly in love with
it. And now we want to go to Amsterdam.
Okay, next one.
To see the museum.
This is my favorite. I have to say, I do love Toulouse-Lautrec. I love his view of mankind. I mean, I think this one here, which is the Englishman of 1894 and 96, is absolutely wonderful at the Moulin Rouge. But I couldn't resist putting this one because this was so brave. This is 1890, 95, and the two women in the brothel. It's called The Sofa. And first time you see a lesbian situation. And this was very brave at that time. Okay, next one. Of course you know who these are. It's beautiful Matisse. It's Loretta Green, and that's 1916. And the other one, of course, is Modigliani. But it's a rather special Modigliani because it's the portrait of his mistress, Jeanne Heberand, who was, in fact, when he died, she killed herself. She threw herself out of the window. He died in 1920, and this was painted in 1919. The next one is going to be a surprise. I wouldn't have known that was a Braque. And one remembers, of course, that Braque goes first of all to join Matisse and Derain in Colore when he starts embracing the idea of Fauvism. And this is Braque in his most Fauvist mood. And I was very surprised to see this. I didn't know the picture. It's called Marseille, and it's painted in 1906. Now on the right, it's Léger. I think we wouldn't have been surprised at this. And it's called The Village. And if you look at it very, very carefully, it's like an air view look of the village. You can see the church, you can see the houses. It's an aerial view. It's terribly interesting. Of course, it's post-Cubism. But this one is 1914 and the other one is 1906.
But it's almost Paul Klee-ish in the way that he's distorting.
They're all working in much the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, next one, because this is amazing. I always tell the truth of the story. And I've said it many times, and so I'll say it again, that when Bill and I used to go to museums together, I used to be very cross because he could tell the difference between Braque and Picasso, and I couldn't. The one on the left is Braque, and the one on the right is Picasso. And it is difficult to tell. What's that? Somebody trying to get in?
No, I don't think so.
The one actually on the left is Still Life with lettering, and it's Braque of 1911, and the one on the right is called Autumn, and it's Picasso the same year. And just look at how similar, how difficult it is to describe, and you see how they've absolutely changed the sense of what a painting is, what it should be. I think really it's all to do, really, I think, with movement. I think they'd realize that when we look at things, we don't look at them straight on. We see bits and pieces of things all the time. The way that we move about, and the way that we look at things. And in a sense, this is what they're describing, I think. Okay, next one.
Picasso might also be, Picasso is a bit more open with his textural sort of quality.
Possibly, yes.
Whereas
possibly.
Braque is more bitty. It's like as if you had.
I find Braque.
No, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean it's more kind of like contracted. Like it's almost as if you've got vacuums pulling things into certain locations.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Whereas this is more, I guess, an open weave. It's more loose. Whereas Braque is more.
But you see, it's very interesting when you start looking at it really seriously. You can see where the table starts and ends, and here you can see where the round the table is here, and so on. The things on the table, they're tremendous. They're very well worth discussing. This is so interesting. This is Leonora Carrington, and you remember Leonora Carrington. She was a wealthy young woman, British woman, and we're looking now at surrealism, of course. And she became the mistress, briefly, of Ernst. Ernst seemed to go to bed with almost all of the women painters. And this one is a self-portrait of hers, but the one on the right is my beloved Alice Neal. Now, this picture interested me a great deal. And the reason I was disappointed in not being able to see American art was because I am absolutely fascinated with the way that the Americans were developing their own style before the explosion of the Europeans by Peggy Guggenheim's gallery. When they all came, because of the war, they all came to Paris, and it completely changed the American way of painting. And this one is a strong response to the terrible time of the 1930s, the poverty and the extreme difficulty. It's a painting of a poet, and he's called Kenneth Ferring. I gather he was a very important poet, but in these days in America, he's not talked about because he was that terrible word, a socialist. And I think that it is the most interesting picture. It tells us about the struggle of the 1930s. Now, this one is my beloved Hopper. But this is not my particular favorite, but I was said by now, I never saw the Hoppers I wanted. And this one is a table for ladies of 1930. But the picture on the right is people I like very much. They're called precisionists, or they call themselves precisionists. And in a curious way, they're painting a rather sort of romantic view of mechanism, the mechanical world. And this one here is I Saw a Figure 5 in Gold. It's 1927. It's by an interesting painter called Charles Demuth, born in 83. He died in 35. Now, this picture is in response to a now almost forgotten poet. And the poet is called William Carlos Williams. And the title is the beginning of a poem. And so you get this connection between literature and painting. Okay, next one. You're going to, these I think are just marvelous. Again, we're talking about that terrible, terrible time of the hunger and the depression, and these wonderful photographs. Of this particular one, the one on the left is by Walter Evans, who was born in 1903, died in 1975. They are simply marvelous. Of course, they're of this extreme poverty of this 30s. And it's called Floyd and Lucille Burroughs on a Porch in Alabama. And it's 1936. But look at the one on the right. This is by Ben Shahn, who was a painter as well as a photographer. And this, of course, is cotton picking in Arkansas in both, but this is in 1935. And this is the description of America at that particular time. Now we're going now to see the Whitney Museum, and we're going on the Highline. And this is one of the.
I think that this is the Lehman collection.
Oh, sorry.
We're still at the Met.
Sorry, we're still at the Met with the Lehman collection. Sorry, I'm getting so. Yeah, this is the Lehman. This is I was so cross. This is good. It's the Baltus. I did my MA on the Baltus, and how I managed not to notice the fact that he was possibly a child molester. I don't know, because this one is a girl in front of a chimney, and it's 1955. Baltus was a count, and he was an aristocrat, and he spent most of his time in Paris, and he spent in the end of his life in Rome, and he was always felt himself to be slightly above society. But what I think is interesting, you're right to remind me it's the Lehman. Of course it's the Lehman, because this is the whole point of that I was going on about. Side by side is the Baltus and the Rembrandt. It's an unusual Rembrandt. It's a very early one. It was when he was very successful, right at the beginning of his life. And it's the portrait of a woman in 1632. And there's a sort of a careful drawing, which eventually will change. It's a very, very early one. Now, this was so extraordinary. Again, very, very interesting being actually together. Of course, that wonderful El Greco, one of the most sort of typical El Grecos of the Christ clutching the cross. Saint Jerome, actually, it's not Christ, it's Saint Jerome. But he's wearing the attributes of Christ. But the one on the right, I think, is absolutely wonderful. He's somebody called Giovanni di Paola, and it's 15th century. But the title is wonderful. It is The Expulsion of the creatures of the world from paradise, 1445. And there is God, presumably. There the terrible, there's Adam and Eve and all the rest of them going off down there. Isn't that wonderful? It's together.
Very mystical,
It's
the symbolism as well.
Wonderful one. Okay, next one. This one was a great shock. This is, again, Van Gogh, but it was one I'd never seen before. An extremely ugly baby, I have to say. It's Madame Roulin and her baby in 1988. Look at the detail of the hands. But the one that's next to it is a great surprise. I would never have known. I had to keep going back and looking to make sure that I was getting the right information, because this is Signac. Again, do you remember how we saw the Braque being involved with Fauvism? This is Signac in the same period. It's the same. This is a bit earlier. This is Colore, 1897. But this is Signac. He's born in 1863 and he died in 1935. And of course, he became a follower of Signac, of Seurat, and as a sort of a pointillist. And the next two are Bonnat and Vuillard, who were particular favorites of mine. The one on the left, I think, is wonderful. It's Vuillard, and it's his mother, Madame Vuillard, going into the steps into the studio. Here are the steps at the back, and I love this picture of her, this lady leaning to, a bit like me. She's probably got a bad back on the side there. And the one on the right, of course, is Bonnat, and it's before dinner. It's a very interesting one. The woman in the way he describes space, the woman sewing, and yet the table on this side. They're tremendously like each other. One is 93, and the other one is 1894. They're virtually the same time. Okay, next one. Now we come. Again, this is all the Lehman collection. This one on the left is personally, for me, was interesting because when I first went to America with Bill, I was at Amherst College, and Amherst College is in Mount Holyoke, and this is what we're looking at. But we're looking at Thomas Cole, very early American, and I love these because they show you the sort of the wild excitement of the New World. And this particular one is the view of Mount Holyoke of 1820. It's very early, and the one on the right is Frederick Remington, and this one is Reconnaissance, and it's a reference to the Civil War, of course. And this one is 1902.
And it's a night scene.
It's a night scene, which is very interesting. And look at this, a lovely piece of painting.
Remington.
Lovely piece of painting, I think. I'm interested in this because what disturbed me so much about not seeing what I wanted to, which was American artists, because I really wanted to sort of look carefully at the way that they were discovering their own style before, as I say, the inclusion, the rush of the Europeans. Okay, next one. Because this one on the left is perhaps one of the most famous ones. It's Caleb Bingham and its traders descending the Missouri, and this is 1845. And now we are jumping nearly a century, because this is George Bellows, and it's Up the Hudson of 1908. And the roughness of that one, I think, terribly interesting, these two. But the next one I've put on because this was Bill's favorite. This is Thomas Eakins, and we saw Thomas Eakins again and again. And this particular one is it's very, very beautiful. It is, the Schuylkill is the river that goes into the sea at Philadelphia, and this is the champion rower. It's called the Champion on the Schuylkill of 1871. And look at this this kind of painting, this very interesting reflection of the water. I love the one on the right. It's also Aiken. It's called the Thinker, and he was a poet called Lewis Kenton. He was a friend. This is 1900. And I think it's got a slight, I suppose it's like Sargent in a way, but it's somehow much more sort of
it's more like
intellectual. Yes, I think it's a lovely painting, that one. Okay, next one, because there she is. There's Mary Cassatt. There's Mary Cassatt with her sister Lydia. Cassatt was a wealthy girl, came from America, but she spent most of her life, and in fact died in France. And she became really a very important, and this is Lydia in the garden, and this is in the 1890s. The one on the right is interesting because this shows the Americans joining the First World War. And this is Child Hassan, and it's called Allies Day, and it's May 1917. And as I say, the Americans have just joined into the First World War. And look at the difference in the colour. Okay, next one. And now we're in the Whitney. Sorry, I got this, it's a bit muddled, because I want to show you the Highline, the next one. This is the most lovely thing. It's lovely. It's paid, it's the city of New York paid for it. And it's an old, I believe it was an old railway, wasn't it? And they've made it into
yes,
this one.
It sort of runs through a portion of the west side, and it would sort of connect from
west and east. Really.
So it finishes at the Whitney on the lower west side.
It's so lovely.
And then it runs up the side to kind of connect to the docks that are up there. So it was obviously a way to ship, to move product, I think. And then it was derelict for quite a long time.
And then they got it's completely the people. I mean, the local people. They do the planting. It's completely free. It's one of the things. It's a beautiful thing to do.
And it's all filled with I think the whole point is it goes through several different landscapes.
Oh, yes.
So you have like arid zones, swamp bits, but it's sort of weird also because a lot of these very luxurious buildings were built around the same time right next to it.
Yeah.
So you basically are like inside somebody's kitchen, with like,
looking into
it's not very private. So it's a bit of a weird thing, but
it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Lovely. And it's lovely. And here is the Whitney.
So it ends with the
Whitney. It ends with the Whitney. The Whitney was originally in the center of Manhattan by Marcel Breuer, but this one is the new Whitney, and this is Renzo Piano, the architect. That we were not pleased with it, but this is interesting. This picture is by Robert Henry, and this is Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, 1916, and it was she and her female friends who started a museum specifically for American artists. The reason being, she came from this very wealthy family, the Vanderbilts, and they were buying European art, and they were particularly, they were buying up all the Impressionists and so on. And she decided that she was a sculptress herself, and she decided she wanted a museum specifically for American people. And this picture is by Robert Henry, who was one of the painters of the time. And it's a marvelous picture of her. It shows her sort of elegance of 1916. Now, on the right is the one that Camilla was talking about, this lovely woman who we didn't know anything about. I've only put a couple of them on. It's Ruth Sasawa, and she was born in 1926. She died in 1913. And as you say, she came from California. Mm-hmm. And these are all metal. They're absolutely beautiful. This one, there were so many of them like this.
Really wonderful use of material.
It was lovely, so delicate. Yeah. And the top is a watercolor. The top is a watercolor. These two are metal, thin metals.
This is crocheted metal.
Yeah, they're absolutely beautiful.
This is fantastic.
They're all around about the same time. They're 2001 and 2. Okay, next one. This was so interesting. This is Rockwell Kent. And again, it's 1921. It's one of the Americans I'm talking about. And it was called The Trapper. And it's so interesting. The group of people here, you can just see this marvelous thing, marvelous piece of composition here. The one on the right was a great surprise. I couldn't find anything about him. I've looked and looked. He's called Arthur Goldthwaite. Who he was, whether he was an African American, I don't know. But unusually, he was painting an African American in 1925. And it's a lovely painting. It's just called Rebecca, because I can't tell you anything about him. I didn't know. We couldn't find it. Okay, next one. This one I think is very funny. These are these funny 1930s Americans I'm so interested in. This is Thomas Hart Benton, born in 89, died in 75. And this one I think is very funny. It's called The Lord is My Shepherd. It's 1926. And that's an extraordinary painting. But the one on the right is much more like the sort of thing that he was famous for, which he was with these extraordinary sort of sportive things. And this is Dempster and Tempo, the boxers of 1926. And of course, this marvelous way the boxer has suddenly been pushed into the audience in this thing, which is very funny.
It's huge as well.
It's huge picture, huge picture. Now, the next ones we're going to see are my favorites, these lovely precisionists. This is the one on the left is Charles Sheeler. I wished I could have shown you more. If I'd have had more time, I would have done, because I think you would have, they're beautiful paintings.
I'd never known about him, so this is also a real great education. It
was a marvelous painter, and I love the compositions of them. The one on the right is Charles Demuth again, and this is the feeder. The building 10, they're both, one is 1930, the one on the left is 1932, 33, and the one on the right is 1930, and they're both working in this particular way. And I wish we could have shown you more of these, because they're terribly interesting. These weren't many. Now this one made me cross, because again, I love Hopper, and this is again, it was in the Lehman collection, and of course it's the most famous. You know, he was born in 82, he died in 1967. And this is early Sunday morning in 1930. Now, the one on the right is very important. It's by an Italian American, a man called Joseph Stella. Now, it's Brooklyn Bridge, and it's painted in 1939. The reason it's important is because it was the first really very difficult piece of engineering that America made, and it was the first bridge put over to join Manhattan to the mainland. And it was done very, very early. It was done in sort of 1890, I think, something like that. And this particular picture is showing, he's an immigrant, and he's showing the excitement of his feeling about New York. Can you see at the bottom here? There are all the skyscrapers and the strange images here. He was a futurist, of course, but it's a lovely painting, I think. This is 1939. Okay, next one. And here we have, of course, very few, again, Whitney, virtually all that we could see.
Oh, no, keep going.
This one is Franz Klein, and it's Mahoney, and it's 1956. And Franz Klein was 1910, 1962. And the other one is, of course, Willem de Kooning. And again, these are the only people in the Whitney that I could find. And this is The Door to the River of 1960. The next one is going to be, you won't be surprised, of course, and again, Jasper Johns, The Three Flags of 1954. They were very amusing. This acoustic. He was born in 1930, and he's still alive, of course. But the ones on the right, I think, are very funny. And these are the bronze beer cans and the ballad team ones. And they're both very ironic, really, in this interesting way. Of course, we're looking now, of course, at pop art. Okay. And this lady, she became for me a great I knew of her but I never really appreciated her until this experience. And they're absolutely wonderful. It's Louise Nevelson.
Neville's.
And she was born in 98, and she died in 76. And they're all found pieces of wood. And this is a detail on the right. And this screen is so beautiful. It's 1959 to 60. And we saw several of them, didn't we, in the end?
We did.
We got more interested in them every time, really.
We did. Again, it's sort of because this one's in it's in a kind of odd space on the top floor, facing kind of like the city, and it's kind of like tucked in a corner with a Calder hanging sort of slightly above it, and so you kind of don't know what you're expecting. And I think that they sort of put it in there almost like furniture, which is a real disservice, because the way that she was, we started to talk about how she made them and whether she laid it out on the floor. And composition, and each one is so different.
And again, they're discarded pieces of
monochrome, exactly, monochrome. But her eye for composition, for scale, for framing is just unparalleled.
In a curious way, I associate her with those precisionists in the same sort of way. They're extraordinary.
Yeah, but there's always a sense of playfulness about her. Whereas with Agnes Martin, you're kind of scared to look closer because it's so controlling. But with her, there's always this sense of play. And then she titles them rather unusually, like Cathedral in the Sky.
Or this didn't have a title, this one.
Yeah.
5960. Okay, and the last one, you won't be surprised. And there's me in the corner. And but the proportion is useful. You'll get an idea, of course. So
that's the Calder.
That's the Calder. We're going to see some
Louise's
lovely
work was right here.
And this one, I mean, it's Warhol. It's before and after. Now, the last one we're going to see is the Guggenheim Museum, and again they were preparing for another show, so we didn't see really much here. Okay, next to, but we did. There, of course, is the Guggenheim. This is it's a beautiful museum. This, of course, was not. This was from another time. I just picked this out because I had to remind you what an interesting building it is, really. But when we were there, they were, as I say, preparing for another show. Okay, next one. They're very strange, and this one, surprisingly, is Van Gogh there. And again, Van Gogh, we keep on coming back to more and more and surprising, beautiful Van Goghs that we see all over the place. This particular one is the Mountains of St. Paul, and it's July 1989. This was right at the end of his life. And there's a really, look at the detail, look at the paint quality. So you understand immediately how very important he's been for painters like Guston and all sorts of people. Now he still is being looked at. Okay, next one. This, of course, is an interesting Gauguin. This is Gauguin the first time on his first trip to the South Seas. And look at the plate, that it's jute, and it's very, very thin painting. They're interesting, these are detailed, because you can actually see the sort of the quality, because as you know, he had no money, and he was painting with all sorts of strange things, and he was always running out of paint. But this particular one is interesting, and it's his first time. It's 1891. Okay, next one. And this is my dear favorite. I do love him. This is Vuillard. And these screens are so beautiful. And they're made of, they're distemper actually on paper and then put onto canvas. And they are lovely. And these are the details. Again, just look at the paint quality. They're so beautiful. This is one. Beautiful one. I really again, one sort of fell in love with people again and again. And for me, the Vuillards became real great favorites. There was no doubt. And here we have you know who. But these are interesting Picassos because they do show you his development. And the one on the left, of course, is 1900. And this is when for the first time he goes to Paris. And of course, he's looking at Toulouse-Lautrec. And it's the Moulin Galette. and it does look like a Toulouse Lautrec. But then that is 1900. But by 1904, this is woman ironing. And this is really the blue period, though this particular one is grey. And then, of course, is the 30s. And we've got the woman with the yellow hair of 1931. And there is no doubt about it. We were just absolutely
the scale of this
yes,
is huge.
It's absolutely huge. Yes.
I am not a fan.
We weren't a fan at the
but
end.
This was just very, very compelling in person.
Oh yes, it is. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
This was a great. I had no idea he was so influenced by Lautrec when he first went to Paris.
Sort of a bit Munch.
It is a bit, yeah. Now, this is me in front of Pissarro.
Which is the largest Pissarro we've ever seen.
Yes.
Because there was a very good Ashmolean exhibition of his a couple of years ago. And
It's
this was, again,
painting.
just absolutely stunning.
And the marvelous light from of the thing that he did. This is the time that he was with Cézanne, do you remember? And this was 1867, you know, when he and Cézanne were working together. When Cézanne went to live to him in Pontoise. And this is where he lived.
But you could literally climb inside the frame.
It was a really glorious picture. We loved this one. I think, is that the end? I think it is. Yes, yes, it is. I think, yes.
Oh.
Is it those?
What happened?
There was one of the, I've forgotten, this was the end of it. I think.
Oh, this is the end.
All right.